Hello and welcome to the Jann Arden podcast. I'm Jann Arden. I'm here today with Sarah Burke. Caitlin Green is quite ill. Her young child keeps bringing stuff from daycare and giving it to her out of just a loving hand. Here, Mom, here's some kind of weird stuff out of a petri dish. Listen, this person that we're going to be talking with today needs no introduction because she's a very, very, very good friend of mine. But I'm going to give you one anyway because Sarah took some time to, from her point of view, to explain to folks who Cynthia Loyst is. She's an exceptional human being, I'll tell you that right now. And this is what Sarah wrote. I am so excited to welcome back friend of the show, that's you, Cynthia Loyst, and friend of mine and Sarah's, Cynthia Loyst, a national best-selling author, producer, television host. You've seen her for 10 seasons on The Social. She's also an empowerment and pleasure promoter. She talks about it a lot. She writes about it a lot. But we're going to talk about something else today that a lot of people are going through big time right now, just with the climate of the planet. There's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of unknown stuff. And that's burnout. Burnout in your workplace, burnout in your relationship, burnout with your own company, just burning out. Please welcome Cynthia Loyst to the show.
You guys, that was a nice introduction. Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
No, it's great. Caitlin is so bummed out to not talk to you today.
I'm sorry, but it's true. You nailed it. There's been a revolving door of weird ailments in my household, and my son is not a toddler anymore. So, I think her son's under 5, and they're just cesspools at that age.
Yeah.
Just picking up everything and horking it out in your face.
But it also, being sick adds to the already a huge amount of pressure that we're feeling. So it's one thing to feel good and face these obstacles and the challenges that we have every day, emotionally, business stuff, what's going on in Canada and tariffs. Like, everyone's so concerned about stuff they have never been concerned about in their lives. I don't think people have ever been more political in their lives as they are now.
Yeah.
And then add that a chest cold, you had to get a puffer a few months ago.
I did. And that was really you think you get to a certain age in life and you're just like, I made it through. I wasn't breastfed and yet I still didn't get asthma. And yet here I am halfway through my life at least. And I have to get a puffer. So there's some weird stuff. You're a puffer kid?
I'm a puffer person? Girl. Yeah. Well, first to go in the zombie apocalypse.
That's right. I'm with you. I will be there too. Jann, I feel like will survive longer than us too. So
listen, I was so sick at Christmas time. We talk about being sick on this show constantly. And as you know, anyone following us knows that I had to cancel a couple of shows. But
that's right.
All I'm saying is that it adds to the challenges that we face. When you don't feel good, you just feel like throwing in the towel and giving up. But anyway, right out of the box, there's a new addition to your bio. There's a new addition to how we introduce you. Your Wikipedia is fucking getting longer. That's all I can tell you. Your new self-appointed title, a professional sensualist. Mm-hmm. So I am going to throw that over to you. I'm getting tingly elbows just thinking about what a professional sensualist is, because it sounds delicious.
Yeah, I think, how sometimes you have to just say things because it's what you aspire to be. And I'm saying I'm a professional sensualist because it embodies an essence of what I'm reaching for every day. Meaning that I want to exist in a world where I'm in my body, that I am experiencing things, that I'm not just tuned out, tapped out, wandering through my life. And let's face it, I think most of us spend our lives, Jann, you mentioned the stress that's going on in the world, where we're really disembodied. I'll even say people who are doing work on themselves, therapy tends to tend towards working on the mind and making us think differently. And that's valuable, don't get me wrong. But I think what it often forgets about is how important it is for us to get in touch with our bodies and to be in our bodies and experience the world through all of our senses. And I recently, through this cold that we're talking about that's been kind of never ending since Christmas, I entirely lost my sense of smell and most of my taste. It wasn't COVID. It was this sinus infection. And I'll tell you, I've been walking around for the past week and a half feeling like I'm almost in like a cage. There's no other way to describe it, but losing both of those senses that I mostly take for granted. made me realize what an awful experience it would be to exist in the world without either of those things, because they bring us so much deep and unabiding pleasure. And yesterday, for the first moment in a long time, I actually was able, I picked up the smell of patchouli in the air when I was going to the sauna, and I was like, and it just was the sense of bliss that went through my body was so profound. It was like I smelled something for the first time. Even, I'll tell you this, I walked into a bathroom stall that did not smell good, but I was grateful for it in that moment.
For the stench. You were grateful for the stench.
Thank you. That's what I mean when I say I'm trying to be a professional sensualist, because I think we take for granted what it means to be able to hear, see, feel, smell, touch, taste, all those things every single day. So I think it's a reminder for all of us just to drop back into our bodies every day.
Well, listen, being human is about the senses that we have. Mm-hmm. Our humanity is based on food is a huge part of life. I don't care who you are, even if you're one of those people, if you're one of those persons that just eats to live. Like you're just having enough calories that you can run up that mountain, whatever, get to the top of Pikes Peak. There's a lot of people that are very perfunctory about food. I know them. I know people that are not foodies.
Them.
But for me, food is a huge part of my life. Yeah. And when people have spoken about losing their taste, did you lose your taste, Sarah?
Yeah. Oh,
when you had Cynthia, she did indeed.
Sarah did, but did you lose your taste buds because you had COVID at some point? Maybe that wasn't.
It was just for like a moment or two, but okay. But even I too have had a sinus infection in the last little while, and
that'll do it too.
Same, yeah.
Awful,
but
awful, right?
I just can't imagine. I don't think there'd be any joy in it for me just chewing, swallowing, no matter what the textural combination was.
No.
I just don't think I'd give a shit if I couldn't taste what I was eating.
Agree.
It's alarming. And so it's a reminder whenever you lose one of your senses that the other ones start to kick in and they become more like when I heard the birds chirping, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to hang on to that. Or, but we need all of these things to be in action to truly, I think, really, really deep drop into our sensuality and be present. Yeah.
That's what's missing. We're moving through the world without even stopping to smell, see, or notice things at all.
Because you take it for granted.
Yeah.
You take it for granted. It's a full stop. People speak about gratitude all the time, and gratitude is not just a word. It is something that actively requires your participation.
Yeah.
It is not passive. It's like hope. Great. Hope. Hope actively requires your participation. It's not just 100%. A thing that you wish for, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about sensual empowerment. I mean, it is out there in conversations, certainly on the internet, social media, movies, television. We see people having great times. Advertisement, we see people literally having an orgasm because of a hamburger they're eating somewhere. Like that hamburger is so good that their back is arched and they are just like, everything's happening to me because this burger is so good. Come and buy one. So it seems to be used as a tool to advertise, this is how this can make you feel.
Yeah.
But yet a lot of us ain't feeling the feelings. We are having a hard time tapping into what you're describing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, remember that commercial? I feel like this was back in the 90s or something like that with a woman who was washing her hair and just having like an orgasm.
Oh, Herbal Essence.
Yeah, Herbal Essence.
Jinx, buy me a Coke.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, I do think, obviously, there's always going to be marketing geared towards people and selling a kind of version of what they think their product will bring to your life. But what I do find is interesting right now is this kind of conversation that I haven't seen before. Well, I shouldn't say ever, but right now it feels like people are talking a lot about women in midlife and sensuality or sexuality. There seems to be this new, to talk about movies like Baby Girl, older women.
I was going to bring that movie up.
Yeah, All Fours. I don't know if either of you have read Miranda July. She's an artist, a filmmaker out of California, and she wrote this book that I devoured in a weekend called All Fours, about a woman, a mother of one, who decides to pick up and go. Her plan is to go from LA to New York on a road trip by herself, just to kind of experience life. Well, she only gets just right outside of her city, and she puts herself up in a motel. and she stays there for like 2 weeks. And I mean, I don't want to spoil it for you. She has a very strange quasi affair and affairs, and it's kind of sexy and it's kind of weird and it's kind of filthy, but it's definitely got people talking, and it's a very divisive book. And I feel like these are part of those things. There was also an article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago written by a woman who says that Generation X women are the sort of last generation of women who really experience sexuality in a very particular way, and that the generations after that are experiencing it differently. And we are hearing about younger people having less sex. And so I wonder if there's this attention on women in midlife right now because we've been considered historically like not sexual at a certain point. You reach menopause or perimenopause and you're considered dowdy or whatever and forgettable. And so I think women are trying to embrace a little bit of like, no, I'm still vital. But I will say the flip side of this, I had a conversation on the weekend with a friend of mine who's going through perimenopause, and she feels that it's too much pressure. She's going through the side of menopause or perimenopause where her libido has just disappeared. And so when she's seeing all this celebration of women in midlife embracing their sexuality, she's like, can you just fuck right off? Like, I can't identify with that. Right. So
I
think
have a friend like that too. Yeah.
Right. You need conversation.
But hormones, there's hormones, right? There's all that. A lot of times women are so low in testosterone and pregnenolone, progesterone, estrogen, all the things.
She's making up all the things.
I'm not. Those are like real things, and I'm on every single one of them.
Okay.
I have a patch on my stomach right now that's a little estrogen patch. I do a testosterone cream that goes on your lady bits. The pregnenolone and the progesterone are pills. And I also do something called...
changed? Like, talk about how that's changed. Like, what have you noticed that's different
Well,
since you started
my
hormones?
health and wellness is completely different. So I'm almost at 2 years, and I went to a specialty doctor 2 years ago. It cost me a fair amount of money. I'm not going to lie. My family doctor he said he's getting into it more now, but it wasn't something that they did. So I got a bunch of blood tests. I got a whole bunch of urine work, 24-hour urine collection. She wanted to see what my baseline was before she started me down this path. And so every hormone that I have is curated. It's all made for me. Like, I go to a special pharmacy in Calgary. Shout out to Pharm, PHARM. And they are amazing young kids that make all my hormones for me, because it's not just a one pill fits all thing.
Right.
Yes.
What it's changed for me: sleeping, my skin, my hair. I had an injury on my Achilles heel. This is something that sounds really benign and silly, but one of the things I said to the doctor, I said, I've had a sore Achilles heel for 3 years. It just comes and goes. I stretch it out. I do yoga. I do all the things. She goes, you have no testosterone. She goes, it's impossible for you to heal. So 3 months have gone by. I got out of bed one day, and it dawns on me that I have not had any pain in that. And I haven't had it since, because my body is actually drawing on things that it was losing on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. So it's changed my life very, very profoundly. I have less anxiety, excuse me. And it's just everything that happens, like you said, Cynthia, when you go through menopause. And some women are starting to experience that in their late 30s.
Mm-hmm.
I ran into a woman in Zara the other day. We had a conversation. She knew who I was, and she's just had come from her gynecologist, and she's going to get a hysterectomy. She goes, I cannot take it. I can't do my periods. The Marina IUD didn't work for her. I think there was a lot of things that were suggested, and she's
over it.
The heavy period, she's over it. She's done.
My cousin just said to me over the weekend, because I was like, hey, how are you? We hadn't talked in a while. And she said, I'm starting to feel like myself. I went and got some hormone replacement therapy. And she's only a couple months in. Mm-hmm. So it can be completely...
It can
Cynthia,
be.
Do you have any of that stuff? Not yet.
No, I don't. But I'm great. Listen, I'm equal parts grateful that we're finally having conversations and people are learning about, focus on women's health and talking about perimenopause, because it seemed like it was part of that realm that nobody talked about and nobody researched for the longest time. All these gaps in medicine. However, I will say that this is the double-edged sword. It's like everyone's talking about it. So it sometimes feels like everything's attributed now to perimenopause. And it's like, oh, that must be perimenopause. Oh, that must be. When I went through my burnout, which I know we're going to get to, one of the things that really bothered me was that a lot of people, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people said, oh, that's perimenopause. And I even said that to my doctor when I was, at the peak of like falling apart. I said, is this perimenopause? And she's like, no, pump the brakes. That could be a small, tiny piece of it. And I'm certainly not against hormone replacement or hormone, what do they call it now? It's not HRT. Anyway, hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah, HRT.
Or menopause hormone therapy, I think is what they call it now. I am not against it and I will be on board. I haven't done it and I've recovered from burnout. So I think this is important for people to know that it didn't take antidepressants. It didn't take hormone therapy. It has taken an entire overhaul of my life and habits and dropping back into my sensual
Well, I was going to
self.
say, I do a lot of things outside of that. That is not the solution. It's lifestyle too. And you know me, I'm constantly down on the bike and doing
You're
stuff,
so
and I
good.
move a lot. But I just do it because I just know at the end of the day, I'm going to feel better.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily love going down there, but I really try and eat well, like get fiber, and I still don't do enough protein. I mean, I'm one of those really shitty vegans that doesn't get enough protein, so I'm augmenting that with really great protein powders. So sorry, got a little frog in my throat. And I'm doing all the things, but I also live in trees. I talk a lot about my geography, where I am with the animals and the trees. I mean, there's so much science to what my eyes are seeing when I look out this window right now is very comforting. I'm not seeing traffic. I'm not hearing sirens. I'm not doing anything. So on my
Your
immune
nervous
system,
system.
because I
Yes.
notice when I go to Toronto for work, and I'm there usually every month without fail, I am agitated. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do this all the time, but
It's a lot.
you got to work.
Cynthia
Yep.
lives on the east end near the water, and I live on the west end near the water. I feel like that plays into decisions about where you're going to live, hey?
Yeah, it does. And I think the nervous system thing, like I think most people are familiar with the idea that all of us biologically were born with this, very primal system that was meant to protect us when we were out in the wild, in primitive lifestyles, and that your fight or flights and kicks in that system, and this cocktail of hormones kicks in so that you can like run away from the bear or the tiger or whatever. The problem is that we have all these unnatural things that are constantly activating our nervous system in the days that we live today. My job is an example of nervous system upheaval, which is just like, I'm not wired to sort of like be in the public eye. I've learned to do it, but every day there was that upheaval. Not to mention every time nowadays when we turn on our phone, social media is feeding us stuff to activate both our pleasure centers, but also our nervous system. And it's very disruptive. And then, the 24-hour news cycle, if you live in a city, an urban center like myself, there's constantly sirens, like you were mentioning, like all of this stuff is wreaking havoc on us. And most of us just absorb it constantly, and you can go about your day. I think the thing is that what we don't realize is that for many people, eventually there's like an accumulation, and that energy needs to go somewhere. And I had no idea about nervous system resetting, or and again, I'm not here as a medical expert at all to talk about this. I'm an expert on my experience, and I've done a lot of research since then because of what happened to me. But I think most people, and the reason why you're hearing about burnout more and more, is because we live in a different world. And all of us went through COVID, which was also a huge nervous system. Thinking for a while, which we all had a moment where we were like, are we all going to die? Like, tell me you didn't have that thought
Can
for a
you
moment.
speak to absolutely?
Yeah.
I went through that for 6 weeks, waiting
Yeah.
for literally something to penetrate my skin overnight, and I'd wake up, with one eye seared shut, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't
Yeah.
get to my phone.
Ugh.
What led you to believe you were starting to lose it? Like, can you talk about the symptoms? Because I think women maybe it would be women and men. Sorry, I don't want to exclude
Yeah.
anyone. What kind of led you to think, oh, I'm in trouble?
Yeah, I mean, it was slow and subtle, I will say. It started
Okay.
off, I think, months before I actually took a leave. It was irritability, extreme irritability, and a kind of like tired but wired feeling constantly, like exhausted but couldn't stop working. Constantly felt like I had to be filling my schedule, a kind of frenetic, anxious energy. Then a kind of like low grade rage that just kept on, like, so finding myself snapping and angry at not only the injustices of the world, which are worthy of anger, but then snapping at like stupid things at work, my partner at home, irritable with my son, like just, it was just kind of like I was managing that aspect less and less. The way I would see it visually is like a poison was like just seeping through me. And then it all started to come to a head towards the fall of 2023, where again, I mean, everyone knows what was happening in the world, the situation that unfolded in the Middle East, in Gaza and in Israel. And it sort of all came to a head as I was going to work and just realizing like, I don't think I can, my job is to talk about the things that are happening in the world. And I couldn't talk about that. We couldn't talk about that because it's so complicated and loaded and emotional. And
you can't
also,
win. You can't
and I
win.
was absorbing all of it and felt very helpless towards the people who were being directly impacted, indirectly impacted. And so all of this noise was happening in my brain. And it just led me to, I would say, like, the best way to describe it is I just collapsed. I collapsed first by, I couldn't stop crying for days. And then I couldn't stop sleeping for days. I couldn't string a sentence together for days. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life because I am not, Jen, you know me, like I'm not a depressed person.
You're very
And
steadfast.
I've been quite steady in my entire life with like emotional regulation. So to feel this cocktail of rage, irritability, exhaustion, and deep, deep sadness was really, really frightening to me.
One of our listeners, Sam on Instagram, like she asked this exact question, like, what was your breaking point? And the follow-up is like, what did you know wasn't right in your body? So with what you were just saying, it's almost like knowing I'm not the same like happy-go-lucky person I normally am. I couldn't, you never
almost, well, I felt almost at a certain point I was so sad and tired and all these things, and then I just felt nothing for a while, like just empty. And then I remember so vividly, like I would do a bit of like movement like during the day. And I mean, I could cry talking about it right now, but I would just burst into tears. I wouldn't even be thinking about anything, but it was like this stuff I'd absorbed for months and months and months and just been burying because I got to do this and I got to do that and I got this on my schedule and da 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 da. It just all came up like a big, huge emotional vomit, and I couldn't put it down any longer. And I do believe that if I had continued somehow, which I don't know how I could have done this, but if I continued to bury and bury and bury, I think it would have turned into deep depression or something else. I think that energy has to go somewhere.
How do you start to fix it?
Well, again, I feel very lucky that I had a workplace that, does care about mental health. And so I had an availability and a boss who noticed. And so I did take advantage of like about 8 weeks off. And during that time, because I think this is something that a lot of ambitious women also tend to experience because we want to do well and we want to work and we want to, so I went right into the mode of like, how am I going to fix this? And I remember my therapist just saying to me, you got to just rest. You have to just rest. And so I think for people who are listening, who don't have the availability to take a chunk of time off, there are ways to rest without taking time off work. And what that looks like, I've learned there's like a bunch of different types of rest that we just take for granted. First of all, prioritizing sleep. People talk about it all the time, but I eliminated anything that would get in the way. So I got rid of social media for 2 months. I made a commitment. I'm not going on it at all. Because I was beforehand going in the middle of the night. If I woke up, I would go on social media. Like all these things that were, yep.
Like when
in
you
the middle of the
In
night.
the middle of the night, I would find myself being like, oh, I'll just go on here for a bit. Bad move. I eliminated alcohol for 6 months completely because I found that was disrupting my sleep and I needed to reevaluate. Jan, you were a huge inspiration in this realm of like, how was this a part of my coping mechanism and a way to sort of separate from work at the end of the day. So again, I prioritize how can I get the best 8 hours of sleep? What are the things that I know intuitively are getting in the way? So I think if people are listening, the first step is rest. Take a look at the way that you're eating, check your iron levels, talk to your doctor, talk to your workplace.
Just putting this out there.
Yeah.
You got 3 kids. They're all under the age of 10.
Yeah.
You're a full-time work
Mm-hmm.
and full-time mom. You have a
Mm-hmm.
partner.
Yeah.
I mean, I know rest seems like that. Do you just become completely selfish and say to the kids, well, maybe I'll back up a bit. Did you have a
Yeah.
discussion with your child about what was happening to you?
I did, but I didn't do a deep dive in it. I said I was taking some time off work and that my work was supportive and that I was focusing on trying to just learn new things about myself and life, right? He didn't ask a lot of questions. I was there to answer any of them, but he didn't ask a ton. But I think to go back to your person with the three, there are many people, single moms, things like that, who are not going to be able to do that. People who are in the healthcare industry, there's, tons of burnout there.
Yeah.
And I think there's a great book by a woman named Kristen Neff. She's done a ton of research on this. And her research has shown that mindful self-compassion is a huge, huge beneficial thing for people in burnout. So what does that mean? It sounds like, oh, okay, self-care, blah, blah, blah. No, we have inner voices going on all the time. And that inner voice can either be a kind, wise voice, or it can be an asshole. And most of the time, ambitious people have an asshole in there being like, oh, you shouldn't have said that way.
I
Oh,
feel
you didn't get enough done
seen.
today, right? You feel seen. Okay, so Sarah, I'm glad this resonates with you. So
Yes.
you screwed up that conversation. You fucked up with your child this morning. Oh, why didn't you get that done? Your house is a mess. That voice, I had a lot of that. You need to consciously start to replace that voice with mindful self-compassion. It's about training yourself to talk to
Yeah.
yourself the way that you would talk to a close friend who's having a hard time. That's one piece of advice of catching that voice. And this is something that mindfulness meditation also helps with. If you can even take 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, there's tons of freebies online. Insight Timer is one of them. And it trains you to watch and see the way your mind works and to catch those thoughts that are actually contributing to your overall mental health and well-being. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's a starting point. Kristen Neff, incredible. She's got a book that just came out called, I think it's a workbook for mindful self-compassion. So I highly recommend it.
Okay. We'll put it in the
I
show
mean,
notes.
yeah, thank you, Sarah. It is so important to speak to yourself in a way that's compassionate, and how you would treat a friend. You would never talk to a friend the way you speak to yourself. And let's face it, I mean, I've said this ad nauseum. The person you're going to have the longest conversation with in your life is you.
Yep.
And you notice it when you're a kid, when you're playing with your dolls. I mean, you're having these outside conversations with your dolls, but you're really talking to yourself, and you're developing your social skills and all those things. And yeah, it's hard not to stop those kinds of behaviors.
But it's
People just
all
get into
little,
habits.
it is hard. And I think the thing is that what people need to know is little tiny steps add up
Yeah.
to bigger things. And so
Yes.
even if you cannot change, everything, you won't change everything overnight. Small habit changes and tapping into your intuition. And the only way we can tap into our intuition and what our wise inner voice says is if we give ourselves a little bit of time and space and quiet. So whether that's on your car, on your commute in, turning off the radio, turning off everything, and literally just trying to listen to asking yourself that question. What does my body need today? What does my heart need today? These sound like airy fairy, and maybe 10
And if
years
your
ago,
answer
me,
is potato chip, the same as mine,
that's right.
then
Listen to the fucking
that's
potato
okay
chip
too.
voice too. Yes.
How do you maintain this? How do you maintain, because, and I'm just going to say, you and I have had conversations, a lot of really great conversations, like once a week. We usually touch base. And you're like, I I have to really be mindful because I feel like I'm headed down that road again. And so maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah. Like, is it
Yeah.
2 years now since your break,
Well,
or
it was fall of 2023, so it's a year and a half
almost?
probably.
Almost. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of weeks that have these couple of weeks that have been a
Like,
little
how do you
bit.
play the long game?
Yeah, one of the things is being self-aware enough to know that I probably will, my disposition, and Sarah, maybe this is like you a little bit too, where it's like, and actually Jan, you too. My creativity comes in bursts. I do like to work a bit, and then I have to recalibrate. I have to kind of pull back a bit. And whether that's on a month-long scale or on like a daily scale, I have to find places to pull back. And I have to remind myself, I have to sometimes book it in. The other thing is to have good friends around who can kind of call you out. Like I will say, Josie, who I do my podcast, Cynthia and Josie's Unmentionables, which of course, Jann, you've been on, and Sarah, you've been you were a huge resource when we were building it as well. Josie and my sister are good, and Jann, you too, of noticing, like, it's like, oh, I can, I've noticed that you're a little bit like, you're a bit rushier this morning. My sister will tell me if she can tell like some things about how my voice changes when I'm a little bit closer to burnout. And it hurts to hear, but it's also important because it is a little bit of a flag. So have someone close to you who knows you really well, who you trust and won't be offended by if they say, hey, you doing okay? Can just be a sign. And then I also need a lot of white space in my calendar, which I haven't done this month. I've been overbooking myself, and so noted.
One of our listeners, Deb, had asked specifically about caregiving, which you both sort of mentioned, and this question is for both of you. Jann, you've been in a caregiving position before, obviously. So, I mean, the tools that you sort of mentioned there about like, okay, so some white space in the calendar. I actually have never even thought of like the commute as a resource of like no one bothering you. You're alone, whether you're on transit, public transit, or in a vehicle or on a bicycle, it doesn't matter. If you're walking somewhere, use it as a meditative time, right? To ask what you need. But yeah, it's those people who like the caregivers who go from thing to thing to thing that are going to have trouble doing those very easy things, right?
Jann, how did you manage that?
I barely did for a long time, and then I'm terrible for asking for help. I'm just the worst. I'm not anymore, but the old version of me, I don't know why. I think there's so much shame involved, especially when you're looking after someone who is suffering from memory loss, like Alzheimer's, dementia, that kind of stuff. So I didn't really want anyone to know that my parents were really struggling and losing shit all the time, and that they couldn't drive anymore. And, they were feeding the dog 14 times a day. Jann, I have fed the dog a half a loaf of white bread and milk for 25 years. And I'm thinking, well, the dog's 5. And the loaf of bread thing, Mom. And I was just like, how am I going to get this to end? And the dog was obese. Belle was giant. I was wondering, what is happening to this dog? She was eating a loaf of Cobb's bread every day. Anyway, I got help in. I leaned on my friends. I started talking about it. I started talking about the things they were doing, and I started laughing. I started finally laughing again. So humor for me was huge. Although the situation is dire, it's never going to get better. There's no cure. There's no pill. There's nothing you can do. And it's very isolating. There's hardly any help. You talk about, riding your bike and trying to take your time, have that moment, breathe, whatever activity you're doing, take that time to rejuvenate. Well, I live in a province where the government offers 3 hours a week for respite for caregivers. I know some places are now considering programs, and it might already be happening to some extent, of paying the person staying at home looking after their sister or their husband or their father-in-law.
I've heard of that too.
Because it makes sense. It makes sense from a medical point of view. They're not dealing with a stranger. They know the routines. If they need extra medical help, that could be augmented. But what a concept to actually... So someone could, let's say I could stop my job for 3 months.
But still get paid.
And get paid.
Yes.
Yeah.
To look after them. And I hope that that's a program that actually does get itself through the Senate and through the House of Commons, because I think it's a fantastic program. People would be so much more willing to be making $30 an hour.
It meets
to
people
wipe their
where
mom's
they
bum.
are.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot too. These difficult things form character. These difficult things make you resilient. They make your shoulders broader. It made me the best version of myself to go through that with my parents. It made me a better person. I'm so grateful to something so dark and so horrible that I didn't think I could do. And I was definitely burning out. When you talk about that, Cynthia, I was not sleeping. I was so anxious. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I would just panic. And every time my phone rang at like 3:00 in the morning, Jann, Dad and I are wondering what to wear for dinner. Like they were going to be on their way to my house like at 3:30 a.m.
Yeah.
And a few times they did show up.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, no, I need someone to stay there with them. And then my dad died. Then it changed the thing. But I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell you the truth right now.
Yeah.
I was hoping that he would die.
Yep.
I'm going to tell you right now. So if you've had those thoughts,
it's okay.
Do not feel like you're an evil, sinister person. I laid in bed and I thought, please take him home. You need to go home. So those are the kinds of things that cripple people, though. Don't let it cripple you. If you're sitting there going, oh my God, can this just be over already? That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also for women in caregiving positions, I mean, in any position too, and again, I don't mean to gender this at all, but we get raised, a lot of us, on, how to be useful, how to be, like, to sort of, I was at a funeral a couple months ago, and everyone was talking about this lovely woman, about how she, she put everybody ahead of herself, and all of her children, she was always concerned. And I was just like, okay, yes, it's great, and she was wonderful, but are we still like lifting up? Is this what we want? Are the words, the dying words, to be said about us? That we basically just didn't do
I don't know
anything for
why I'm
ourselves,
laughing.
just everything for someone else.
Because we needed a laugh.
Yeah, I think that we need to question that. So even if you're in the throes of like caregiving and caregiving burnout, I hope you are having a laugh. I hope you are sharing some things. I hope
I did
you
eventually.
are, you have to.
Yeah,
You
I did
have to.
eventually. Well, how many people have said, so both your parents died of basically Alzheimer's. Do you ever worry about it? I'm like, I'm not worried about it, but you should, because you're gonna be dealing with me. I'm gonna be eating chips and probably trying to touch myself in the living room with my pants pulled down around my
I
knees.
hope so.
No, I'm not gonna have to worry. You're gonna have to worry. So that's always a funny thing people say. It's such a weird thing.
Oh, it's true.
Anyway, I wanted to, and if this is too personal, then please just tell me to go away. But and this is part of a question that somebody asked about um, if
How
you're
hot you
feeling.
are. Isn't it? Is it that one?
Well, no,
No.
it was.
Oh.
Where is she? Okay, here she is, Jennifer Rooney, and thank you for this question, Jennifer, because I asked this. So during your burnout, are there strategies that you used, like that one of you was in the mood and the other is not? Like you're in a relationship. Obviously,
Yeah.
Jason was very supportive of you and is not going to be going, well, I can't believe it. We haven't done it for so long. Like you have a great partner, but maybe in a general sense, she might be asking you as a sexual
Educator.
professional,
Yeah.
educator.
So I'm a sex professional.
Did you wonder where I was going to go?
I knew you were going to go. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Here's the thing, Jennifer Rooney on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it is, how do you turn yourself on? That would be my first question. And this is a hard one for us to answer. I mean, if you're anything like me, you were probably raised for a certain period of time in your life, like, don't think about sex, don't talk about sex, don't look at sex. Now, that's why I became sort of obsessed with it, because it was the elephant in the room. I'm like, here I am being sent all these messages everywhere in the music and the culture and whatever. And yet my religion, I grew up Catholic, was saying like, don't even think about it until you're married. And it was like this kind of disconnect. And so it really, I think it wreaks havoc on people who are raised with these disconnected messages. And then also, nobody tells you what sex in long-term monogamous relationships will look like. And so we have this idea, all the movies end when the couple first gets together. They don't show the couple 25 years in, right? We have no template for what a sex life should look like. And so we're all just thinking like, am I measuring up? And we're looking up, like Googling, like, what's the average amount of sex? Am I normal? I get all these questions from people being like, oh my God.
The Kinsey reports, the early Kinsey reports, what is normal? And they found out very quickly, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't. And I think that's the great thing about this next generation, is they're talking about some of the nuances of sexual identity in the ways that people didn't before. But to answer the question, it's like, I wonder how often we think about what turns ourselves on, how often we make space for trying to find erotica that we find interesting, or like there's this OMG Yes. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this. It's something that is, it's worth Googling. It's very spicy. It's got regular women. I think it's only women right now, maybe some non-binary people, talking about how they self-pleasure and what turns them on and what kind of fantasies they go in. And it's beautifully shot.
That down.
And then they go and they show what they do. And it's great. Also, I think in heterosexual partners to watch it with your partner, because you learn about yourself, you learn about other people, and it's spicy enough to turn you on, but you have to go and be given permission. Because I think a lot of women think like, oh, I can't possibly with the kids' schedules and the whatever. We've got, again, putting everybody else first. Where am I going to find time to do this? And so, and again, that might not speak to you, but there is probably something. Every single person has something that will unlock that. And so if it's important to you, I think you need to carve out the time to sort of like at least get curious about it. And if it's not important to you, I also want people to feel like that's also okay too. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, for Jennifer, so if a person isn't in the mood, that doesn't mean you don't have to be in the mood. Is that kind of is that kind of where you're going with that? Well, it's like if he or she doesn't want to be involved, then you can be involved with your own self.
Oh, yes. Well, also, okay. I mean, yes, if you're feeling pressure from your partner because it's like they're in the mood, they can take care of themselves, first of all. They can take care of themselves and shouldn't put pressure on you. But you also are, if you're not in the mood, why don't you start exploring taking care of yourself and seeing where that takes you? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I think, I also think intimacy can be defined in different ways. Like, are you feeling connected to your partner? Can you guys cuddle and take like intercourse off the table if that's not exactly what brings you the most pleasure and sensuality? Are there different ways you can direct? Have you asked for like, hey, today what I'd really love from you is a massage and I'll give you one in return? Like, again, Dr. Laurie Brotto is a Canadian researcher out of Vancouver, and she has done an incredible amount of research on women who have quote unquote libido problems. So Dr. Laurie Brotto wrote a book and did research about mindfulness and sex. And so what she did was she got a group of women together who were complaining of various issues. Some of them were perimenopausal, menopausal, libido problems, painful sex. And she found when they went through a mindfulness program, again, getting to end where we started, getting into their senses. One of the activities she got them to do was to take a raisin and look at the raisin and study the raisin and sniff the raisin and then put the raisin on your tongue and not chew it. Just notice the way that it feels in your mouth and then slowly take a bite and notice the way that the juices might go down your throat and then slowly swallow, like, you know, really reducing down the act of eating that to the tiniest thing. And the reason why it's important and effective is because you take that idea and you bring it into the bedroom. How can I explore this person's body that I've probably seen in all kinds of situations a million times in a new and different way?
One of the biggest complaints I think that long-term partnerships express over and over again when they have affairs, when they stray, whatever you want to call it, when they, seek, having sex with a person outside of their marriage or their partnership, is the mundane, repetitive nature of a sexual act. So he does this and then they do that and then she does this and then that's that. And then I know exactly what he's going to say here. She's going to do this and then it's over. And it's not fulfilling, like you said, any kind of desires as far as, role play, fantasies, whatever, taking the time to tell your partner, this is actually what I would like you to do. And, I'm just being the voice of so many people that feel this way, both men and women. They cannot articulate, they cannot find the courage. There's so much shame and guilt, like you said, the religious stuff, in asking for what you need or want. And just feeling like it's something really bad. And that is a very reoccurring theme culturally for us. And I think that's why there's so many things that go sideways, whether you want to talk about the incel community of men that feel like women have done them wrong, that they're not putting out, they're not getting what they need. Women hate me and they've foiled my life. Like I'm talking in complexities here. There's so many layers to this stuff, but I think it does begin and end with a person being able to articulate to another person what they need. You told me about a book a long, long time ago. And there was sort of you made a synopsis. So you tell me and tell me what the line was of what people are looking for. When you said the line to me, you can paraphrase it, but I can see that you're even in the dark. I can see your face recognizing what I'm going to say. So it's all about sex. Is all about.
Well, the book is called, I think the reason we need to talk more about sex, or we need to talk, or why we need to talk more about sex, is by Alain de Botton, who's like a French or British philosopher. And I think it was like something about like that this, like, it was reducing it down to like our ugly parts that need to connect with someone else's disgusting. We're all disgusting, and we need to
But to
marry our
find
disgusting bits,
someone you can do those disgusting things
disgusting things
with.
with.
But it was the word disgusting was used in a very whimsical, beautiful way. And the
Yes.
reason that it was described that way, it's because of the internal feelings that people have about it being somehow twisted and deviant. And this is something that any kind of organized religion, no matter what you're following, has provided us with for 2,000 years, probably even longer. So when you find someone that you can explore that with, that's pretty magical. But getting back to, a partnership, that mundane, repetitive thing that happens, and then you just start doing it less and less frequently. And that seems to be a very acceptable narrative with partnerships. However, I know people in my own life that have been married for 35 years that have an excellent, intimate, personal life.
I'm going to
And
guess those people are happy with their lives too. And they're probably not burnt out, and they probably are curious and imaginative. This is the reason why, as somebody who has, I went to the University of Michigan to get a sex educator certificate. So I studied a lot of this. And what I found was people were looking for hot tips. And I can give a lot of those. Having said that, I think the bigger picture is that if you're not happy with your own life, if you haven't made space in your own life, if you're not curious about your own life and your partner's life, it's hard, no matter how many tips or toys or lubes or whatever you get, to make a sex life work, because it's like there's an inhibition right then and there.
Yes.
And if you're feeling burnt out and exhausted and you're angry and you're resentful, no amount of the little accoutrements that are meant to turn you on are going to work. So you have to address the bigger picture first, right? And then
if your partner is feeling like a roommate and they don't seem to, like, let's say there's no give and take, right, in a relationship, it's probably the same in the bedroom as it is outside of the bedroom, right?
Nailed it.
Yeah.
So I think that is the most important thing, is so many women come and ask that question of like, and actually I have also heard from women too who say that, like, I gave birth and my husband is no longer interested in sex and I'm dying. Like that, it's sometimes the roles are reversed.
Yeah.
And again, we don't get the tools to learn how to communicate, to get curious, to figure out. I think men also, there's pressure on them also that we don't talk enough about.
Of course.
The idea of, being horny on command, of performing, the idea that they also go through vanity concerns as they get older and not feeling like they are, as virile. And again, we don't really make space for that and talking about that. And I could go on and on about this, but
Patreon listener Laura asks, during the 5 years since Finding Your Pleasure, your best-selling book was released, and I was lucky enough to get to interview you on one of your big book events in Calgary. It seems like yesterday.
I know. And
I
yet
can't
a million
believe
years
that
ago.
was, yeah. Since that was released, Laura asks, how has finding your own pleasure changed? Just in light of what the world is doing now. So have you rethought or reconfigured what pleasure means to you in those
I
last
think
5 years?
It's never lost on me that I launched a book in January of 2020. And that as I was doing the book tour, the world just
we
went
were afraid of shaking hands. Like, you and I were having discussions backstage of how we should approach it. Because the tsunami was moving from Asia all over the world, and we didn't know what to do.
We lived through that, right?
We weren't
And I
locked
think
down.
everybody in those moments, like a conversation around pleasure, like became so sharp focused as you watched people reduced to like living in their own home, having only access sometimes to parks. That's why you saw all these people like baking bread and discovering like all these strange things. It was all about pleasure because that's all we had. For a while, we didn't know if we were going to make it out of this. So people really, really started gravitating towards. And that's why I think you're seeing also the rise of burnout afterwards, because what we didn't do was quite recalibrate enough to kind of go, okay, well, we're going to do the workspace differently as a result of this, because we learned that some people can work from home and we can do flex work. And some mothers really craved that, or men, I don't want to gender this, but people learned they could do things differently. And what you're seeing right now is this push for everyone to go back to exactly the way things were. And in fact, politically on a global
It
scale,
wasn't good.
It's almost like the pendulum has swung even further back.
Yes.
So all that progress that I feel like inadvertently we made during COVID and rediscovering pleasure and the important things in life and friends and family and the environment and all that, it's like, and so I feel like right now pleasure is more important than ever. We don't want to lose focus. And especially now that we're being activated every single day, you know, what President Trump is trying to do to all of us is that shock and awe. And it's a distraction, and we only have so much energy in a day. And if we're finding ourselves whipped around, again, our nervous system is activated and our anger is firing up, you're going to burn out, and you're also not going to have that energy to turn back on yourself to explore, like, oh, maybe I want to do a dance class. Maybe I want to do a quiet art class. No, because you're on your phone and you're angry, and then you're angry at the person in the parking lot, and then you're angry when you go, like, that's wreaking havoc on your pleasure. So I want people to be more cognizant of it. I've had to be more cognizant of it.
Last question, and then we're going to let you go because we've been talking for 51 minutes and 14 seconds.
It's felt like 5 minutes.
A sensual experience is often equated with a sexual experience. And we know that isn't true completely, that there's a lot of sensuality in life. And I'm wondering if you can just leave us in this last minute with how people find a sensual personal experience for themselves, that whether they're single, and I'm not talking about, you know, self-pleasuring yourself or things like that, but of what sensuality means. And maybe that word the mystery can be unlocked from it a little bit, of, you know, how people can kind of even know what to reach for on the shelf.
I mean, I think what comes to mind is that we were all born to experience pleasure, and you need only look at a small child and the way they navigate the world, and how in their little chubby bodies they wander around, they take off their clothes, they touch wherever they want, they touch everything they want, and they just they dance without even thinking about it. Like, we were all born that way, and yet culture and society and self-consciousness and, you know, ego, all those things come into play, and we overthink everything. We go into our heads, we get out of our bodies. And so I think a great activity that maybe everyone can do, and actually we can do this together right now. Do you want to do this?
I'm ready.
I think tapping into the
homework?
breath. We're going to do homework right now, but
Okay.
I just want to walk you through like a small breathing exercise that has been helpful to me for just when I feel a little frantic. I do this also if I wake up in the middle of the night and then I can't sleep. I think it's a great grounding exercise. You could do it in the car, you could do it wherever. And again, it aims to tap you right into your body. Okay. This is a small one. Okay. So think of the numbers 4, 7, and 8. So we're going to breathe. I'll tell you first, and then we'll do it together. You're going to breathe in deeply for 4 counts. You're going to hold that breath for 7 counts. And then you're going to breathe slowly out for 8. Okay. Ready? We're going to do it together now. Breathe in.
Wait, I was doing it already. Let me reboot.
Reboot.
Do
Breathe
I need
in.
my buffer? Okay.
I don't know. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you just
How many times do you do that?
I do that only a couple of times because sometimes it can make you feel a little lightheaded.
Yeah.
In kind of a lovely way. Yeah, it
Yeah,
sort of like brightens up.
It does force you to stop everything. Because you can't think about anything else but breathing in that count. Like, I didn't think of Trump one time during that breathing exercise. Not one time.
That's the way we win. We win through breath. We win through breathing together. Something to think about.
Well, listen, I don't even know how to thank you. You are such an important person in my life. Everybody knows that. Everybody
I love
knows
you.
that.
I love you. Love you.
Love you too. And it's crazy to think that I've known you for a decade almost, because I met you during the show at the social, and then once in a while we'd go for like a drink afterwards. I remember walking across the street to that pub, and it was like going on a date. It was like whenever you meet new friends as a grown-up person,
It's true.
And, we just went by ourselves. We didn't know a lot about each other. And we just wandered across the street there. I think, I may have had a drink or two back in those days because I'm coming up 10 years in August. So I probably
Yep,
did in the very
you
early
did.
days. And then that was that. I remember us going to Vegas, and we've taken lots of trips and to Palm Springs and New York. But it requires reciprocity to have a friend, doesn't it? You can't just expect someone to do all the work, and it's just, you're just very important to me.
Same. And I always, you meet people in life. We were going to talk about this. I'll come back on. Sometime we'll talk about dating and compatibility. But one of the things is that, like, I felt immediately when I met you, and I think everyone's had that experience, that I knew you for a long time. It just gelled. It was like, to talk about it in the context of music. Some people you meet and you're just kind of like, oh, this is like discordant. It's like a bad, like, it doesn't really
Can't
work.
push a rope.
Yeah, other people, like, there's a harmony immediately. You're making that kind of thing. And I felt that with you. And then when you said that your mom used to say packs of souls like to travel together, it's really stuck with me. And I do think that that's true. We know that there are people who I think that we did know maybe in some way, another realm,
There's
another
no
life.
other explanation for it.
Hmm.
Anyway, you're welcome anytime. And if you ever need me to talk about anything on your podcast,
Always.
feel free to hit me up. But yeah, just once again, Cynthia has a podcast with Josie Dye. It's called Unmentionables, and I would start from the very first episode and go through those because they are fantastic, fantastic podcasts. They're funny, they're irreverent, they're kind of naughty. They talk about uncomfortable things in a way that you'll go, oh, but been there, done that. So check out Unmentionables
Thank you.
and subscribe to them. I think you guys are just doing a fantastic job. But anyway, look after yourself. Say hi to Jason and Jaya and
Thank
your
you,
mom and your
guys.
sister. And
You guys are killing it. Thank you, guys. Love you all. And
they're
Sarah,
doing
so great to
something.
see you.
You too. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Bye, you
Cynthia
guys. I'll
Loyst.
call you later.
Cynthia Loyst has been our guest today, and she's going to call me as soon as we hang up here just to recap everything we've done and to talk about if it was okay. Was that okay? And I can already hear her voice. And it was more than okay, but I'm going to call you anyway. Anyway, yeah. Cynthia Loyst, Unmentionables, Josie Dye. Check it out. And check out Finding Your Pleasure. You can still see, I just saw that book like a week ago at Indigo. You can still buy that book.
Bye.
Everything's in the show notes.
Cynthia Loyst, our guest today on the Jann Arden podcast. Caitlin missed a good one, Sarah. And I know she would have had lots of questions for that. I'm really sorry that Caitlin is feeling like crap. And poor Will is feeling like crap. Her husband's sick. There's still a lot of that stuff going on. It's nuts. Anyway, she will be back next week. And next week, we're also going to be announcing her book choice for the Jann Arden podcast book bag. And I hope some of you have had a chance to finish In Memoriam. I was just like, this book, I'm telling you what, and I read it again, right? I just thought, I'm going to refresh myself. But next week we are going to pick a day where we're going to do some kind of a Zoom, some kind of gathering where we can just chat about the book. It's not going to be on air, but I definitely want us to get together and be able to open up the channels and just let people have a conversation.
Let's just actually say, if you go to any of our social media, we're gonna put a couple times out, and whichever we get the most response on, we'll try and do it around that time.
We figured that would be a great way to do it. Like if it's 7:00 on a Monday, or if it's 2 a.m. I like the 2 a.m. time slot, quite frankly, on a Saturday night when everyone's hammered out of their minds. And
Sarah Burke is the only person awake because she never goes to bed. Yeah,
God, exactly. No kidding. But anyway, so Caitlin's she's got a great book choice. So we're just going to let her do that next week. We were going to do it today, but Sarah and I were just like, no, it's not happening without her. She's going to be in charge of that. So that's coming up. Also, as always, we have some great voice notes we had.
I got 4 for you.
We really appreciate you guys taking the time to tell us your thoughts, and thanks for listening, all the things. Patreon, thank you so much for being part of the Patreon. It helps us make this podcast week after week. And as much as we'd all like to work for free, we are entrepreneurs, and we're just out there trying to make great content, and your Patreon contribution every month really helps us to do that.
I want to set the floor for our first week of March. We're going to start bringing back some of our interviews from previous episodes, because we've got a whole catalog, and if you've just discovered our podcast, like over the last 6 months, you might not know that we've got an interview with one of your favorite people in the back catalog.
But we just thought, what a great way to introduce people that want to get caught up, that don't have time to sit down and listen to 50 minutes.
Scrolling through 200 episodes is a big task.
It is. We're going to make it easy for you. We are literally going to curate our own handpicked favorites, best of, and maybe sometimes not best of. Sometimes it's going to be us at really low moments, or when things are just funny and we make mistakes. And anyway, stay tuned for that. It's going to start this Wednesday. So you're listening to this on a Friday. So coming up on Wednesday, going into the month of March, you just check for Recall on all the streamers that you go to week after week, and you'll find us there. Recall with the Jann Arden podcast. We have some voice notes from people, so let's give those a listen and see what people have to say.
Okay. Cynthia and you talked about the hybrid work environment, so I'm going to start with this one.
Great.
Hi, Jann, Caitlin, and Sarah. This is just a comment on the hybrid working arrangements that a lot of people are doing that you guys talked about. So I think one of the most frustrating things about the whole hybrid work situation is that a lot of employers are doing across the board mandates where you have to work in an office a set number of days, regardless of what position you hold or what sort of a job that you do. And I think in a lot of cases, it really alienates people. So as an example, I work for a large employer. We have staff dispersed throughout Canada. One of my colleagues is in a provincial capital, but they literally are the only person we have in that entire province. But that person has to go work in an office a set number of days per week because the employer has a policy saying everyone has to be in office a certain number of days. And it just makes zero sense because they're wasting money on office overhead. And think of that person going into an office to literally sit by themselves all day. Just
not fun
to say they're in an office and they have an office space. So I just think it isn't very considerate to that person. It doesn't think of that person and just treats them like a number. And ultimately, that's essentially what they are. And that's not a positive experience for a workplace.
God, no.
Smart response.
Did we catch this person's name?
This person's name was, I will tell you, Matthew Freeland.
Matthew Freeland, thank you. You make a very, very good point. And I think there, once again, you have mental health issues and just being in a space by yourself when you can't bounce ideas. We all know that we work better when we collaborate. We all know we work better when we've got people supporting us, encouraging us, and human interaction is important. So I get that completely. Listen, the solution is out there somewhere. I think people are actively working on how we get people back into the office, how we keep them at home. We'll get there. Change is slow. It doesn't happen overnight. And all of this stuff that happened, obviously, at the very beginning of COVID, is we didn't have a chance to even design that. Sometimes when things are forced on the human race, it's pretty cool because the change is expedited. There is no process. It is like done and done. And there's very few times in history when we've experienced, we go from this to that, literally overnight. Anyway, thanks so much for that note.
Okay, this is a great question, music related, from Sherry.
Okay.
Hi guys, Sherry from Toronto. Jann, I think Mixtape is a really cool album. I have a question about how things work. When you decide on a song that you want to do a cover of, how does it work? Like, do you go and ask the owner of the song permission? And who is the owner? Is that the writer of the song or the studio or either of those two? And then once you get permission, what about the monetary side of it? Do you have to pay like a lump sum up front for using that song, or is it more like a royalty-based thing? Anyways, that's my question. I love knowing how things work. Have a great day, guys.
That's a very, 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 very good question. So basically, anyone can record anything. I don't own any of it. There's all kinds of different royalty streams that come in. So obviously the writer of this song owns the song, or the writer. Sometimes there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 writers of a song.
Yeah.
But I don't go and contact these artists. I don't contact their publishing company. I can literally pick whatever I want to play it. They make the money. So I would get a mechanical, if my version of a song was playing, I would get a small fee, a small royalty for the Jann version of it. But the chunk of that money goes to the person that has written it. And of course, they have publishing deals. So if they share their publishing of that song with their record company, with their publishing company, everyone splits that money up. It behooves people to have other people record your music because it's basically found money. They don't have to do any of the work. You know, Seal doesn't have to do a damn thing to make money on Crazy. And all those covers that I did have been covered by multitudes of people.
Yeah.
Like when we were choosing the songs and we looked up Wicked Game, it's been cut by 40 or 50 or 60 people. Wow. I am certainly not the first person to cut that, and I won't be the last. But yes, the majority of the money that goes. Now, that a different thing, and this might be what you could be referring to as well. You might remember a song called Bittersweet Symphony. Oh, it's a bittersweet symphony, this life. Well, there's a refrain off the top of the song that is a string. It's a string sound, and it's from the Rolling Stones. Dun, 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 dun. You guys know exactly what I mean. They had to pay the Rolling Stones to use that chunk of their recorded version of that riff. And it was a long drawn out thing. You might want to go online and look up exactly what unfolded with that. A Bittersweet Symphony.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think the Rolling Stones finally let them get the money. They were withholding like royalties off of their version. They were just being dicks about it because these guys wrote the other part of the song.
Right.
So that's a whole different thing. When you take part of a song, use that, and then write your own thing. So there's a lot of licensing that goes on with rap guys that use a bit of an ABBA song, or that stuff happens all the time, and it's very, very different. Licensing music is very different.
Okay. Got it. You want one more?
Of course.
Okay. This is funny. It came out of our Strombo episode, and Trish has a good question.
Jann, I love you. Thank you for your podcast. Question: wouldn't George Stroumboulopoulos have the worst tinnitus in the world? And yourself, as a musician, would tinnitus be a factor at any decade? Much love, Trish Rankin.
I mean, he's listening to his death, whatever he was listening to, but
there's so many musicians that have acute hearing loss in their careers. Back in the day, you know, music was exponentially so loud on stage. Like their amplifiers from their guitars, they didn't use in-ear monitors. Like if you're watching us right now, I have just a little earphone. So this is what I sing with, something very similar to this. When I first started, I had 2 giant speakers that I sang into the microphone, and the sound was blasted back at me, and I ran them way too loud because I was always trying to get louder than the drums, louder than the guitars. I don't have to do that anymore. Everything's controlled. What I hear, I control in my head with a guy that's running just the mix for my in-ears, as he does for the whole band. But I have never experienced, I've had tinnitus a couple of times, usually from going to a concert. It's very short-lived, though. In a couple of days, the ringing will go away, but it's a real thing, and it's a serious problem. I have had hearing tests, and my hearing is exceptional. I don't know how I've managed. I've been somewhat careful, but George Strombo, I would love to know. I'd love to pay for a hearing test, to a guy that listens to music so loud that he doesn't know if his heart is beating, his bones are rattling.
I would pay for that test just to know.
Well, today's episode, we spoke with Cynthia Loyst about sensuality and about, finding things that really pleasure us. And he said on our podcast a few weeks ago that was something that was it. It
Yeah.
brought him so much joy to listen to loud metal music. I'd feel very depressed if I was listening to that. It's just not my thing at all. I like loud music, but not loud to the point of discomfort.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Anyway.
people you'll see in concerts now, there's big bins and a lot of them that hand out the little orange foamy earplugs that you can twist in. Believe me, you can still hear the concert, but you are going to save your hearing. A lot of young kids that are at concerts, you see parents at sporting events, baseball game, hockey games, they'll have headphones on their children because the music in between or the guns that go off or the blasts of this and that at sporting events, those can affect little ears. So I think, God knows, my parents would never have had the wherewithal to protect my ears, back in the day. But
So there
anyhow.
you go. Good answers. Okay, so we're gonna pop on over to Patreon.
Yeah.
And I promised Jann I would tell her about my latest date.
Sarah's been on some dates. She's been on 3 dates actually. And we've definitely got some things to chat about. So come on over to Patreon.
I'm also an auntie.
What?
I became an aunt, and my sister had her baby.
Oh my God, we're going to talk about all that. That's so fantastic because Lisa is on the grandchild tour. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Sure, perfect.
She's been in 3 countries in 3 weeks, meeting her grandchildren. So It's been pretty incredible. Anyway, thanks for listening. You're awesome. Subscribe to us. Give us, a few stars. It always helps you find our podcast week after week. And don't forget to tell your friends about Patreon. A little bit of money, less than a cup of coffee every month helps us to make this show and helps us to create really great content for you guys week after week. Oh, we have one question. She's got
2
her finger
things
in the
that
air.
I want
2
you to
things.
send us. Your response and reaction to hearing the Buffy St. Marie interview a second time.
Yes.
Okay, after we put out the episode next week. And let us know, maybe you want to send us a voice note or you can write us a DM on socials. What would you actually want to hear again? What's another interview that you want us to bring back? Let us know.
Oh, cool. Great. Well, that's it for today. We'll see you next time. Toodly-doo.